Time's 5:45. I'm going to call this committee meeting to order. Town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional treaty territory of the Chippewas and Churchina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. Shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries, and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together to a better future. Get a motion to approve the agenda. Michael, Ron, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Any declarations of opinion or inputs? Seeing none. We have a motion to receive the advisory committee meeting minutes of May 14, 2020. Moved by Michael, second. Ron, any comments or questions on those minutes? None. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. No delegations. We have two items for consideration. First one is memorandum from financial management advisor regarding budget review or library. Bruce, welcome. Did you want to start?
I will start. Thank you
Yours.
for having us. We're happy to be here. Counselors, senior staff. Yeah, we're always happy to be here. I'm going to introduce some of my colleagues here. Lauren Hanna is the chair of our finance committee, which would have a similar mandate to this group. Adam Obbs on the finance committee and the board chair. And Julie Rocca, our finance manager. So I'm well protected here. If I need any information, I have all the right people at my disposal. You see, I think, you see, we provided the 2023 audited statements for your record. We should have, oh no, 2022, sorry. We should have the 2023. Everything goes well next week, which it will. Thank you to Julie Rocca for doing such a great job. You can cruise through those. We're happy to answer questions about those. Nothing stands out other than, no notes, and we had a good year. What I'll do is I'll give you, if that's acceptable, I'll just give you kind of a high-level financial overview of how we're doing, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions if that's useful for the group. Very good. So the memo, I'm just going to capture a couple things in the memo that came with our report. I mentioned the finance committee that we have here, due diligence. They dig deep and take line by item looks and make sure that the things that we're doing, they support, and similar to this group, they would present those recommendations to our board for approval. So I thank you to them. I've been here for 6 years. It's my second time coming to this finance committee. And I continue to talk about the good news story from a financial perspective that we present. We provide exceptional service, and we do that maintaining a budget that we've maintained for a long time. So over the course of my 6 years, there has not been an occasion when I've asked the town for anything other than COLA support. We spend all our time managing our money as efficiently as we can. That I hope that's notable to the town and hard work that we do. In addition to that, we use cost avoidance, efficiency techniques at every occasion to talk about or to ensure that we continue the good service, managing our budget in an effective manner. We've eliminated a senior level position not too long after I started. That would be similar to you eliminating a director position. We've eliminated another non-union, non-management position along the way. We've provided you, as part of our commitment to Town Square, we've provided you with $50,000 off of our base budget for the greater good of Town Square. I believe you're using that to support an IT position, which will help everybody in Town Square, including us. And a lot of library geeky things that we do in terms of efficiencies that we don't need to talk about here, but that we do to make sure our collection spending is efficient and the way we undertake our business is efficient. We're proud of that. And it's really, it's something for me to be able to come here all this time later in an inflationary environment and say, I'm not asking for anything other than a COLA increase. This year too, it's we worked with you and it was a bit tougher, so we're getting a little bit less this year. But at council, I stood up and I told you that we're going to work within that budget, and we continue to do that. We have healthy reserves, over 900,000 in our general reserve. DCs keep on growing, which is fabulous. Let's build, build, build. We have a little bit of donation money too. So we have later this year a capital plan, which will come to the table, which we are excited about, which will ensure the continued growth of Aurora Public Library into the future. I mentioned the economic impact study at council, which I'm going to mention again, not in nauseam, because it's that important that $1 spent on public libraries is a return of $6. So that means in this area, given our population, accounting for a population, that's about a $15 million economic impact we have. And I won't take credit for it, but the new Italian restaurant or shop that opened in the former clothing store, I believe it was, I see regular remnants of those food items in our library. And that's what libraries do. We bring people together. This year, for the first time, if all continues, we will have over 300,000 people visit us, which is more than ever in the history of Aurora Public Library, continuing to show how valuable we are to the community and the important role that we play. In many aspects, including bringing people to the downtown core. I'm not going to say for 1 second that I don't expect to leverage the people coming to Town Square for other reasons to come visit me, but we also bring a lot of people to Town Square for the overall health of Town Square. So we do have some budget considerations, pressures that I'll let you know. Obviously, the pressure that everybody's facing is inflationary. We have that pressure as well, and we do everything we can to trim our spending and to be more penetrating in our look when we purchase collections and other items. Collective bargaining, it's well underway in the York region. They're at a lot of tables right now, and I'll say that that's interesting, is what I'll say. But that's pressure that we have, and we continue to want to increase our funding for the capital reserve. So that our future multi-year capital plan will be fully funded and provide great things to the region. I talked about some of the things we've done. We've also leveraged our economies with the town wherever we can. We're now part of ADP, part of the what is it? The Oracle, yeah, the Oracle system. So anytime that we can leverage economies with the town, we think that's great, and we do it whenever we can. I'll just mention just a bit. I think I've covered most of the things. Oh, yeah, I'll mention. I mentioned the 300,000 people that we expect here over the course of the year, and I mentioned too, and I'm happy when I do this, that we had 10,000 people in our library during a study time a number of months ago, and that's significant. That's the largest number of people we've ever had, and those were mostly young people, which we were happy to see. So, libraries, not this group because you guys are an enlightened group, but still, people consider libraries are, not all people think of them as these cool places to go, and if we're not bucking that trend, we're certainly talking about how important they are to the young people in this community. And in Aurora, there's no malls for them to go to, and a lot of them come here as they're coming here right now, and particularly in droves as they prepare for their final exam. So we're as relevant as we've ever been. I want to talk about our continued relevance just for 1 second. So I'm attending the ALA conference, which is the American Library Association conference. I usually go there so I can fast track my learning. And really a significant part of that that conference is related to AI. And I remember when everybody was saying not so long ago that Google was going to make us irrelevant. And it didn't, because there are fewer and fewer trusted sources of information. Disinformation, misinformation is everywhere. We become more of a trusted source. AI is now a new thing that makes us even more trusted, even in establishment where people need to go to feel like they can get correct information. And I was reading last night about it's called AI hallucination, which refers to scenarios where generative AI tools produce erroneous or misleading outputs that appear to be based on factual data. The point is that we are more than ever a trusted source of quality information, and we continue to grow. We've shown that with teens, but we'll continue to grow in many other ways too. So the relevance of Aurora Public Library in this community, it couldn't be any greater. I think we have a notable economic impact. We generate a lot of people coming to our library. We're happy to be part of Town Square. We're excited that we've been part of it since the beginning. We've contributed or supported DC money for the bridge, the corridor, the elevator. And we can't wait for that to open. And me and one of my colleagues are having a programming meeting, I think next week, to talk about how we'll coexist and provide great, excellent programming to the community. So all those things put together, and me never coming and saying I need a lot of money because of this, that, or the other thing. We're proud of that. Our board supports us, and our board gives us good guidance. And it's exciting for me to be able to come here and tell a story like that to you. And we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate you participating in the process. Certainly agree with you, Bruce, that Aurora Public Library does a phenomenal job in our community and continues to evolve to stay relevant and current. We know that a lot of transformation in libraries over the last 20 years, and certainly appreciate everything that's been done. I think for the purpose of this committee, we like to look at the financial statements and just sort of identify any variances or get an understanding of any discrepancies so that we can have a better understanding should it come up. So I just have a couple questions. I guess my first question has to do with the audited financial statements, page 4. So it says the revenue, well, first off, and I mentioned this to our treasurer earlier, since the 2023 statements are so close, I think next time we go through this process, maybe we just defer you another month until we get the more current ones rather than looking a year out. But so for 2022, it states the revenue is $4,012,000, with the majority of it coming from the town at $3.9 million. But if I flip to attachment 2 and you're line by line, for 2022, you show that the revenue is $3.9 million with only 3.8 coming from the town. So my question is why is there a difference? It could be timing, could be something simple.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'll let Julie take that.
Do you want to go or you go ahead? So it relates to the methods of accounting. So on the financial statements are done on full accrual based accounting in accordance with Public Sector Accounting Board standards. So revenue recognition is done in a different manner than the way the line by line is done and the way you see things for budget, where we do it more on a current basis. So you'll see there's going to be things in there that are recognized as revenue or not revenue based on PSAB that are different between the two.
So specific then, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Rachel, when it comes to the revenue they receive from the town, why would there be a difference of $80,000 or $100,000 when you look at it from revenue recognition to PSAB? I mean, we should be fairly clear how much money we give the library.
Contribution to the reserve, which is also funded from contribution to the reserve, which is funded from the town plus the municipal.
Because you have the contribution to
Right,
the reserve as
right.
well.
Yeah, so you add that back. 3.8 plus the 1.8 gets you to the 4 million.
So that's how it is?
Yeah.
That's a great answer. That's very simple. I'm hoping for simple answers to
Yeah.
questions, right? So that's great. My next is really more of from a curiosity perspective. So one of the things that we kind of look for when we look at, from a line by line perspective is variances, what's happened year over year in terms of any changes. So when I look at your expenditures for digital collections, it shows a healthy amount from 2021, 2022, and in 2023, you indicated you spent $360,000, but yet going forward, you're only budgeting $190,000. Is there been some dramatic shift in digital collections that you decided to spend less, or is that just part of the budget process?
It's that we switched platforms to a different online platform, Overdrive from another platform. We tried another platform, it didn't work out. So we were uploading more than normal in a particular year, a couple of years ago, to bring that platform up to where it needed to be. And now it's at a healthy space now. And so now we're down to what we need for a regular year-to-year ongoing collection budget.
So you wouldn't say that this is any sort of decline in
No.
service, right?
No, not at all. In fact, it's an improvement in service. I will take the discredit for thinking moving to another platform was a good thing to do. And I did it. And I accepted that that wasn't my best move. And we moved back to this other platform and we loaded it up and yeah, so our digital collections, print collections continue to be very robust. Our collection manager also continues to find better ways for us to purchase materials efficiently and lump collection purchases together to provide even better economies for purchase. But no, our collection usage, our circulation is up notably.
Just my final question really is more around from a loss prevention perspective. Do you see a lot of theft or loss of books in the library that, is it staying flat? Is it growing or what's happening?
So it's a sad thing when I landed in this business that people sometimes use us as their bookstore. Not so much in the Aurora area. So 3% is kind of a threshold where it concerns me. So as an example now, transparently, on the second floor of our library, I don't have gates there. And people are meandering in and out of the corridor. Me and Doug had conversations about that. We're monitoring that. If it hits a 3% target, then I'm more concerned, and then I put more processes in place. It's an interesting topic, sad as it is. That we have our gates, and if the bells go off, they go off. But I'm not charging my staff to run out after people and reclaim a book. You put those kind of physical deterrents in place, and most of the people are good people. The other storyline there is that a lot of the theft used to be the DVDs and that type of media. We'd put these protective metal strips that we'd see them all over the place. People would find a way to defeat them, or anyway, other ways. But that is becoming less so now because online material is so much more available, right? So theft of our audio collection and our DVD type collection, that's going down because they're just not as valuable. At some point, presumably there'll be no VHS players and DVD players, and it'll just be all streaming. But we have targets that I kick in if we hit certain things. 3%.
Sure.
Right. Collection.
Thank you. Just final question then. So I guess the assumption is you do an annual count, I guess, to be able to determine the value of the book collection.
Yeah.
And what you bought, and that kind of lets you know what, if any, loss there is.
Yeah. There's a snapshot of sorts. It's more complex than a snapshot.
Sure.
But there's a process there.
Thank you. That's it.
The second floor.
Yeah, thanks. Bruce, I want to thank you for keeping the board updated on the finances. Every time we go to a board meeting, we get all the financial information. So I don't really have a lot of questions because I've heard what's been.
You're in the inner circle, right?
Yes, that's it. But my interest now is, what do you think the budgetary impacts are going to be on you as you move into the town square environment? Have you planned that? Do you suggest anything that may be budget pressures because of town square?
So we use our capital, our human capital is our greatest resource. We spend most of our money on our human capital, and that's where I have the most flexibility to navigate through financially. And what we expect to bring to town square is more programming, which is more of our staff. So our manager of programs, Jody Marr, has planned for additional programs all within the budget she has, and noting that 76% of our budget is staff, and I have the most flexibility there to add programming, which is really the thing I expect to do most in the town square environment, right?
Great, no, that's it.
Sorry, going back to the difference between the two, perhaps we can come back to that answer at a different time, but it's not just the contribution to reserve, because the difference between the financial statements of the 3.9, which you listed in your line by line, right, is exactly $100,557. Your contribution to reserves is $180,000. So, you know,
Oh, I gotta see.
Julie.
perhaps that's what I can.
I
leave
can,
you-
yeah, I
you-
can go look,
Yeah.
yeah. There's gotta be, there's something else. I don't know. It's
I'm
it's
sure
an,
there
it's an
is.
accounting exercise. I don't know if it's the other reserve funding.
I'm sure there's a simple answer, but
There
it'd be
could be
great if you
deferred
just.
revenue in there.
Yeah, there's a few things that get to that number we just went through for 2023, so I don't have but I know it's in addition to. You take the cash, this is a cash basis, which is a line by line, and this is the PSAP accrual basis, and you gotta do some add backs and deletions and so forth, but I think it's the reserves. There's also the other reserve, 14,512 for the employee liabilities. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, the post-retirement benefits.
Right, so,
As long as we can just look at it and reconcile it, that's great.
okay, no problem.
No?
Supers, you guys have done a phenomenal job. You know how I feel about the library and what you guys do and what you guys bring to especially to the downtown. Incidentally, I was speaking with another mayor of a town that has gone through revitalization of their downtown. He specifically said the importance of investing in your downtown, creating spaces for people to gather, not just the town square, but libraries themselves as well. They have their town square, their libraries right beside it, and they say that the ROI is incredible. People that visit now, where it used to be a derelict area. And so she said it's incredible, and people need to realize that investments of that kind are so beneficial to communities. So I appreciate everything you guys do, and we're looking forward as we move forward.
Excellent. Yeah, we're thrilled to be part of that, economic impact and otherwise. And I look at my office every day and can't wait for the time when I get to see you out announcing welcome. Thank you very much all for allowing us to join you, and we're happy that we're an important part of the value that Aurorans, the residents of Aurora, enjoy every day.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Hey, item number 2. Number 2, financial management advisory regarding community partner reserve fund policy.
So this community partner reserve policy was requested by a member motion, I believe it was Councilor Reese. To look at, am I wrong there? I can't remember. Yeah, that's right. So what we're looking at for community partners, it impacts a number of our community partner groups, excluding the library and Central New York Fire Services, because we have more broader agreements with the two of them. So there was a few things that we did look at when we did this. We tried to see what others were doing, and we came up empty-handed. I guess we're blazing the trail here with this policy, so we didn't have too much to look against. But we did look at community partners do have a few different nuances. So we also wanted to consider if a community partner such as Aurora Historical Society, which has an asset that they're trying to maintain, is a little bit different than a community partner where they're just doing operational type work. So for the Historical Society, they've got an asset that asset management obligations are way underfunded. So we're allowing that any surpluses there should go towards that asset management work, as we think that's a prudent way to go forward. The policy does recommend that for the reserve, for operating reserves, aside from the capital investment, should have a balance of no more than 6 months of regular operating expenses. And that if it is higher than that, then at the next budget, it should be, their requisition to the town should be reduced until it gets back into line. There is also a recommendation in here for the monitoring and compliance relating to audits. So we know audits are quite expensive. So we don't want to overburden some of the smaller organizations because it can cost like $8,000 to $10,000 for an audit opinion. So as you know, recently the Sport Hall of Fame was here and they came forward. They had their statements compiled by an auditor, but they don't have an audit opinion. So I think it was one of the volunteers in their board that helped do that. Again, when you've got smaller operations for finance staff, and we can actually take a look at that information and put in the policy that there's an opportunity for staff to do more in-depth review for those that don't have audited statements. But for a small organization, it's not going to take too much effort to do that type of review because there's not really that many expenses to look through. So that's kind of in a nutshell of what this policy includes.
Yeah, thanks. This is it's a step forward for sure, and now we're getting some policy put in place about what should be done. It did come from me. Let me ask you this though. How do you determine, there's a word in there called acceptable reserve? How is that number of 50% come up with? Because when we do grants, granted, these are municipal grants going to Ontario foundations and others. They have a different number that they use. So I'm just wondering how the 50% came about for you. And what acceptable means in terms of a reserve.
Have to confirm this fact, but I believe it was a recommendation for a nonprofit. As a appropriate reserve level, that's where we took it from, I believe.
Right. And an acceptable reserve is based on their expenses. When you talk about, I can't remember the exact word in there, but we're talking about the acceptable reserve, and it's based upon their, 50% of their expenses on an annual basis. So what is it all their expenses, gross expenses, or all of the expenses in there, only part of them? What is that word acceptable mean?
So we're looking at gross expenses overall, and as far as acceptable reserve, it's basically it's giving a bit of judgment to the town and to their boards as to what should be considered acceptable, because we can't define every type of reserve in every case. There's different things that happen with different organizations. And it also does require that their boards be involved in improving the creation of any reserves as well. But we would look at what the reserves are, what the purpose is for, when we're reviewing the information that's coming back from them.
And this is total reserves, or are they segregated reserves? How do we do that? How do you identify that through you?
So this would be operating reserves. So it would be the total value of operating reserves that they would have. And it would exclude any sort of asset management reserves. So because those are there to support a asset management plan. Most of our community partners don't have assets, so that doesn't apply to them.
Well, that was my question, because in the 2023 for the Sport Hall of Fame, they decided to change their reserves, and they, instead of having one operating reserve that seemed rather large, they said they have an education reserve fund, and then they've got an event reserve fund, and then they have a capital reserve fund, and I don't know what kind of capital they have, but these are monies that they have not spent and they've decided to put into a reserve. So I'm wondering if those reserves are segregated, or whether if they kept putting $4,000 and $5,000 and $10,000 in other reserves to reduce their operating reserves, then that has a significant effect through you, Mayor.
So for the first two that you mentioned, we would just consider them operating reserves, lump them together. For the capital reserve, we'd actually want to see their capital plan and what their requirements would be to support that. Because part of it is for the capital reserves, it's about underfunded capital and asset management requirements. So if they have a capital plan and reserves and it's a fully funded plan, then they don't require the surplus to go into them.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And also through you, Mayor, have you tested this? And you have your Sports Hall of Fame, you got the HS.
We've looked at it from a number of different perspectives, but we think it's broad enough that it should work for the different needs of the different organizations.
And then if this is approved, or this will be done for the 2025 budget year. Should this be approved, this would be in place for 2025.
So we would take the feedback from this meeting, and this is currently planned for the July council meeting. or, sorry, September council meeting. So we put any feedback we get in from this evening, and then we bring it to the committee of the whole meeting in September, and then it could roll through to the budget.
So the concept, thank you, and again through you, so the concept here is that if you increase your expenses, then there's less chance that you will reduce, or there's a greater chance you'll have less impact on the next year's budget, meaning you'll spend your money, buy t-shirts, buy promotional stuff, buy, because that will increase your operating expense in a year and therefore reduce the impact on the following year. Is that's always the problem with these kinds of recovery methods. So that's what you're proposing.
So what we would do is, one of the things that's common in audits is auditors love to look at transactions in the last couple of weeks of the fiscal year. And that's one of the areas you look at, because that gives you a clear indication if people are trying to just spend money just to make sure it gets spent. So that's a very common thing that does happen. One of the things we can do is if we have any concerns, we can actually request more information from them. We know the ones that will be going through full audit, their auditors are going to be looking at that in more detail. But for the smaller organizations, we can take a look and make sure it fits what their mandate was and the mandate that they presented at budget committee.
And so just the escalation of expenses are not the primary thing. You're looking at the timing of those expenses for that type of thing. Because in this particular organization, 2021, their expenses were 60,000. And in 2023, they're 134,926. So there's been an escalation in expenses. So
we'd get that explained. We'd have to see the information supporting that.
yeah, I'm done for right now. Michael or Mayor has other things.
So I think, I agree overall, it's certainly a good start. Just in terms of those timelines, so if it comes to council committee of the whole in September, as part of this process, are you going to go to the organizations that are identified and present this to them prior to the committee of the whole meeting or after?
After we have this meeting here, I think it'd be worthwhile for us to go to the organizations once we get your feedback and just to let them know this is what's coming, this was recommended by Finance Advisory Committee as we move forward.
And in terms of, I guess, the process, do you see them, once the final draft has been approved and adopted, as a requirement of receiving funding, signing off on this policy in terms of some sort of documentation that they are in agreement with it?
So they wouldn't necessarily sign off on the policy because it's not their policy to agree to. It's the policy for like the town actually providing them funding.
Mhm.
So it's more about how council wants to be able to roll out that funding to the different organizations. I think the key thing is making sure that they're all aware of the policy and that they understand it.
Yeah, I just think it would be nice. It's something to get thought about, that there's just mutual agreement
Mhm.
that this is how we're going to, both parties conduct ourselves
Yeah.
going forward. So the one thing I'd like to see in here that I don't see in here is respect to the organization's dissolution. If for whatever reason the organization ceases to exist, that it's clearly spelled out that the expectation is whatever those surplus reserves comes back to the town.
Yeah, we can add
Right,
that
I
in.
mean, I think most of these organizations, if not all, will probably have it in their bylaw, but it's just nice to include it within our
That's fair.
policy as well. And then the only one that I don't think I'm in agreement right now, or at least need to think about it some more. So where we talk about responsibilities, and you mentioned about council shall reserve the right to overrule a community partner or reserve creation or reserve management strategy. I don't know if it's really our job to overrule their choices of what they want to do reserves or not do reserves. I think our choices are whether we fund the organization or not. When they come in budget time, we can ask the questions that we want answers to. We can question expenditures if that's, to try and ensure that we have confidence in what the organization is doing. And I think our responsibility is, am I going to fund it or am I not going to fund it? I don't know if I really want to go into the weeds of them saying, well, I want to create a reserve fund so I can buy whatever. And then having that debate at council, I don't know if that's worthwhile. I think it's just in general, whether or not we should, you know, fund or not fund the organization based upon what they present to us through the budget process. So I'm less keen about having that kind of ability to overrule reserve creation.
I think part of the purpose of having that piece in there was about making sure that we can have the discretion for our understanding of what the reserves purpose are. So maybe we can tweak it a little bit to be more about, like, for example, the reserves you mentioned, how we would determine if they're operating our capital reserves, or if they're identifying things as capital reserves, actually requiring a capital plan to support that.
And I support that, like within the
Yeah.
policy, it talks about the fact that there's a requirement for them to report to us and say, we've created the following reserves, we've created all this stuff, we're doing all these things, and I think that kind of communication and documentation to council is good. I just don't like us being able to, after the fact, that they go through that, overrule it. Especially when you say, well, it's not their policy, it's our policy kind of thing, right? So I just, you know, we can agree or disagree with what they're choosing to do, but ultimately then it should influence council's decision whether they want to fund or not fund.
We can tweak that.
Sure. And then annual financial statements, you've kind of made the threshold at $250,000 to provide audited financial statements. The rationale behind picking 250.
We felt it was a substantial amount that at that point in time, it was worthwhile having audited statements. We can adjust that in the future depending on how we're looking at it, but it did mean that smaller organizations would not end up
Yeah.
requiring to have the audit, except where it's required by legislation. So like the BIA has to do an audit and they have to use our auditors.
Sure.
So it's required by legislation.
I didn't know if there was any sort of materiality or some threshold you were using to get to the 250, and that's why you picked it, so. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think you know, it sets clear expectations in terms of ensuring that there's some documentation and dialogue in terms of the money and how it's being spent and what that expectation is going forward. And so I'm fine with that. And, you know, to Ron's point about the risk always of organizations, you know, increase their spending at the end so that they don't have to give back some of that money. Well, but I mean, that's why they come to us in budget. That's why they have to explain some of those items, and we look at the variances. I mean, we do the same process for our own departments within the town, right? Where,
Yep.
you know, departments put forward their budgets too, and it's our role to make sure that all spending is justified.
Yeah, I think that just the 250,000, I believe that is a CRA recommendation or a requirement for charitable status only, not for not-for-profits. And so that's probably where that came
Probably
from.
why we got the recommendation from non-for-profit.
Yeah, and they make a recommendation only that if a funder or a stakeholder in the organization requests audited statements, that's best practices for the audit to get audited statements, because if their stakeholder doesn't like what they're seeing, then they stop funding you. So
Yep.
that's the balance there. So that's all I have. Thanks.
It's great. Make them back if they install. There should be a clause in there that basically town funds should come back.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's, as I said, budget, if our job is to create policy, and we should be creating a policy that sets the standard right across the board with all partners, so. Yeah, I think it's good. So I move this. Right, one, all in favor? Opposed, that carries. New business.
So you're looking for somebody other than Ron. Like,
Make it seem like I have
Emily,
to
do-
think about it. Any new business?
Nothing.
New business.
Yeah.
Okay, motion to adjourn. All in